I am back, and today I want us to talk about hypertension, high BP. According to the STEPS survey of 2018, it says about 20% of Zambian adults are hypertensive. Probably the 20% were those who are reported to be hypertensive. But what about the rest of us who are moving around not knowing whether we are hypertensive or not? When last did you check your blood pressure? We take it for granted that we are okay, and it's only when it's too late that we actually get checked and we realize, oh, the blood pressure was the problem. And so we can prevent some of these diseases. I've been told several times, like, look, Belinda, we are all going to die. What's with this fuss with eating? Or don't do this, don't do that. Why not just live life and enjoy, right? But we want you to enjoy responsibly. We want to improve the quality of life. And I like what one doctor said. Imagine that's Dr. Yvette Maseka. I was just preparing for this and I stumbled upon her video on social media where she was insisting that I need to own hypertension machines where we check our blood pressure. And I realized, you know what, it's true. You don't have to wait until you go to the clinic. It's only like 2,000 kwacha, yet the medication to take care of BP and whatever consequences will follow, the hospital bills are much higher than that. But let's now talk about the dietary aspects of hypertension. Hypertension or high blood pressure, it's simply the movement of blood that is too rapid in your body, in your blood vessels. It's a measure of how quickly blood is moving in your bloodstream. So think of it as a hose pipe. You open the tap, water is flowing normally depending on the pressure. And then you put your thumb on it and it just shoots. So it's in the same way that can cause problems in our system. The pressure, when it increases, is what we call high blood pressure. And now this can be caused by a number of issues. For example, the constriction of your blood vessels, meaning they become smaller. So you reduce the space of a surface area through which blood flows. And this can be due to high amounts of lipids in your bloodstream, or the thickening. The walls of the blood vessels become too thick and not fluid enough to allow the blood to flow easily. And so that in itself can cause high blood pressure. Now, where does this come from? I would say, how come all of a sudden my walls of my blood vessels are thick and I have high levels of lipids or fats in my bloodstream? Again, several reasons. Age is one of them, but also genetics. We need to think about our lifestyle. It's very important that we do in order to prevent. Even when you are genetically predisposed, you find that you keep these diseases at bay. They may never even happen with a good lifestyle. And then another reason why we become hypertensive, especially for us women, when you just kick into menopause, you need to start thinking about your diet, about your lifestyle. And also because of menopause, it actually increases the risk of blood pressure, unfortunately. Another risk factor to hypertension, evidence is showing that it's more with the Black people than it is with our Caucasian counterparts. So I was just thinking to myself, why could that be? I thought of something weird, like, okay, is it because they know how to have fun, guys? We need to give it to our Caucasian friends. You hear them say they're going hiking, they're going camping, they're going kind of in the forest to do whatever. And I don't know, probably that is one way in which they distress, because stress is another risk factor for hypertension. And we don't talk about it a lot, but a lifestyle that causes stress, that is stressful, it's work, 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 and nothing else. It's bills, 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 it's loans, it's this. You actually cause your blood pressure to shoot up because you're always in a fight and flight mode. Anyway, my point is we need to distress. As Black people, the fact that we are more predisposed to hypertension, please find things that make you happy. Find a hobby, gardening or something. Right now, I'm starting to love plants. I'm starting to learn the functions of plants that can clear the air in the room, plants that do ABCD. So I'm trying to find that as a hobby, away from work, away from reading nutrition, away from being in communities dealing with cases of malnutrition. I want to do something also that distresses you away from the usual. And that's important also in the management of some of these conditions, right? So how then do you know that you are hypertensive or you are not hypertensive. There are two readings when you test for BP. Ile pamuru is what we call the systolic reading. Ile panshi diastolic. So systolic is when the blood leaves the heart going around the body. So remember, it pumps blood with very much force, and that's why that reading is usually bigger than the bottom one. It's normal that the first blood that comes out is with a lot of force, but the one that comes back to the heart for cleaning and whatnot, and then back again to the body, is what is a bit slower. And that's why the vessels that take blood to the body are much stronger and much wider than the vessels that take blood to the heart. If you remember at least from my little biology, that's what I remember. So that's systolic and diastolic. So that reading that is on top, if it is above 130, some people say 120. 120 is like the optimal. But what is considered normal is where it's below 130. So it could be 125, 120, 115, somewhere there. And now the diastolic, the one at the bottom, anything below 90 is okay. Like if you have a reading of 60, 70, 80, roundabout, it's okay. But when you now start getting diastolic, especially diastolic, meaning that reading below, blood coming to your heart, coming with so much force, that is questionable because those blood vessels are not as powerful as the blood vessels taking blood from the heart to the rest of the body. So they are not built for that pressure. So how is it that, imagine your diastolic is, let's say, 110, or even more than that? That is a red flag. And so that is what you need to remember. So I put up this table here so that you can use when you buy that BP machine. Remember this table. Blood from the rest of the body to the heart should not be coming to you with so much force. It can cause, for example, a rupture. Your blood vessel maybe rips. And then you have what we call internal bleeding. And that in itself is slow death. How do we manage hypertension through diet? Because I know in nutrition we were taught what we call the DASH diet, right? The low sodium kind of diet where you're not taking a lot of salts, especially sodium chloride. So I thought, okay, how practical is that? Because from recommendations, we are told not more than a teaspoon of added salt per day. Think about it, 5 grams of salt per day, not per meal. But unfortunately, I see a lot of us, the food has just come and we are sprinkling salt. If we are making it rain with salt on our food, like, I don't know, before you even taste the food, like, what's with that? Let me first of all find out. Let's pause for a while. Like, what is with that? If you're one of those people who sprinkles food with salt before you even taste,
God have mercy upon
what's
us.
with that? You don't trust the chef? Or do you at all realize, okay, there was already enough salt, I shouldn't have added salt? Or it's just something that you say it's a must. The more the better. I don't know why we do that, but it is a bad habit because sodium is one of the culprits. When it comes to diets, the mineral content of the food is what affects our blood pressure. Sodium is one of those minerals, but worse still when coupled with chloride. So sodium chloride together is a bomb, is a recipe for hypertension. The reason for that is, again, because we know sodium actually helps to constrict blood vessels, and so therefore that can cause a shoot in your blood pressure. But worse still, also chloride plays the same role. And so that combination is not a good idea. And you may have heard some scientists, dietitians, nutritionists, even medical doctors tell you that you need to avoid commonly called table salt, sodium chloride, at least excess amounts of sodium chloride. I remember asking one restaurant lady where I normally eat, and I say, but why do you put so much salt in our food? Like, why should it be to your taste? And she's like, if I don't, people don't buy. I'm a customers, but they'll tell me that I didn't put enough salt in the food. So she goes by customer demand. So when she doesn't put excess salt in the food, she'll not get customers. They'll complain about the food being bland and things like that. But that's only because That's what we've set for ourselves, not so as a standard to say, okay, for food to taste good, it has to be this amount of salt. Usually, ultra processed foods have a lot of salt. If it's not ultra processed, it's the preserved foods, things that are canned. When you read on your label, you see canned in brine. That is salt. Brine is salt. Mostly it's fish, things in the meats category, fish, meats, chicken, even legumes sometimes like canned beans. They do contain a lot of salt in them. So avoid them if you can. If not, I know canned foods have their place, but you can drain them. Even meat, when you buy meat from the store, chicken usually also have a lot of salt. As raw as it is, chickens have salt. So it would be good to soak them before you cook. So for a good 30 minutes to an hour before you prepare, so that you drain out that excess brine or excess salt that has been injected either to preserve or if it's from the feed that they were being given and so forth, so that that salt is drained out and then you can then prepare and only salt to a minimal amount. Like I've given you the rule of thumb is 1 teaspoon of salt per day. So how best I personally manage the 1 teaspoon of salt per day is to have one meal per day. Let's be honest, also, many of us do not need to eat 3 times a day. Now, I'm not talking about the bodybuilder. I'm not talking about those who push a wheelbarrow to road. I'm not talking about the athletes. I'm not talking about marathon runners and so forth. I'm really talking about the average person who is either seated at the market selling something, who is in an office somewhere, who is at home watching TV, who, you just do the basic stuff. Let's be honest, physically, of course. I'm not saying you don't work, but physically, you do the basic stuff. Just move from one area to another in a slow way. You're not doing anything that is requiring lifting and muscle this and it's you don't sweat much. You don't need 3 meals a day. You do not need 16 hours. When Mukurati, no, where is my 16 hours? Therefore a tea break, therefore a snack. No. Our eating, that's where the excess salt comes in. This snacking we like to be. All that increases your sodium intake because already the foods that we are consuming have a lot of salt. And it's very difficult to restrict yourself to a teaspoon. And you find that at the end of the day, if you're always snacking and eating here and there, you have consumed even 5, 10 teaspoons of salt per day. It's that bad. And so, one way of controlling salt intake is just planning one powerful meal a day. And whatever else you have to eat, if you're going to snack, let it be something that you have control over. It could be a carrot, it could be a salsa, something that you have made yourself. Another mineral that causes problems is a mineral called cadmium. This mineral, unfortunately, it's not like there is a food per se that has a lot of that mineral. It's really that it comes into food through contamination. So we have plant nutritionists, we have animal nutritionists, and we need to work together with human nutritionists to also ensure that the foods that are being produced are free of contaminants like cadmium, which have been proven to actually have an effect on decreasing blood pressure. But now let's talk about minerals that can actually prevent or reduce your risk of high blood pressure. And one good one that I love is potassium. Now, potassium is found in foods like bananas, in foods like tomatoes, and also vegetables. So, take in a lot of potassium or potassium rich foods to prevent hypertension. There are certain salts as well that have been made from potassium. So, instead of sodium chloride, you have potassium chloride. But I still say that you need to utilize those carefully, maybe with consultation from your medical doctor, because it still has chloride. You see, and chloride is one of those minerals that also can be problematic even on its own, but also calcium, which a lot of us are deficient in. So calcium rich foods are also good. I know milk has been condemned to be a calcium rich food. We've promoted it a lot as a calcium rich food, but there are some scientists that are saying not really a good source of calcium. But in any case, whatever little calcium is in there does play a role because it is also the calcium in there has a high bioavailability. So you're guaranteed of its absorption. Consume also a lot of small fish. You know why? Because you're eating it together with its bones and everything. You're so carpenter, you are eating the whole carpenter. And that is why it actually can help the increasing your calcium levels in your body. So calcium does also prevent hypertension. And a lot of us are deficient in calcium, which is probably why we are also seeing high cases of hypertension. So calcium, potassium, as well as magnesium are good minerals that you can or you should incorporate in your diet. So look for foods with high magnesium as well. Nuts, seeds, vegetables, whole grains are good sources of magnesium as well as animal foods. But again, like I've said, animal foods, depending on what the animal is eating, it could also have high levels of sodium. So you want to take care of that. Generally speaking, a diet high in vegetables, a diet high in fruits, a diet, when I say high, I'm not saying excessive. Be careful. I say high meaning increase your intake. Keep this at a balance and to ensure that some of these conditions are well prevented. So, another risk factor, and this is unfortunate to me, alcohol consumption. We take in a lot of alcohol as a people. Now, you may wonder why? Doesn't alcohol relax you? You talked about distressing. No, alcohol is actually a depressant. You put your body under a lot of stress to manage the alcohol, and so you put yourself at risk of hypertension. Alcohol also strips away B vitamins like folate. You know, there's a vitamin called vitamin B9, also known as folate, which is like a mop. It helps to clean up your bloodstream. So if remember I said one reason why you could have hypertension is because you have fats deposited in your blood vessels. So folate helps to scrape off that what we call bad cholesterol from your blood vessels. But it's the same folate again that is needed to get rid of the alcohol in your system. So whenever you take in alcohol, you are taking the function of folate to focus now because alcohol is seen as a toxin. It is a toxin actually in the body. Everything has to stop to manage that alcohol. It's only when alcohol is completely taken out of the body that the body resumes normal functioning. And so then you see where that comes in. Another reason why alcohol is a risk factor is also because excess alcohol turns into fat. While you're doing meal planning, if we are going to incorporate alcohol, we plan it as sometimes as a carbohydrate and sometimes also as a fat, depending on what type of alcohol you're consuming. So it's either a fat or a carbohydrate. So when it's in excess, it turns into fat. And we've talked about this several times. And it's that same fat that gets stored in these vessels. And that pot belly that you get is also a sign that you have a lot of fat in your system. And so weight management also plays a role. So obesity, let's avoid getting to the obese stage. Look, we all cannot be of the same size. Let's be honest. Yes, we all cannot be slender, but we all need to be of good weight. So controlling of weight is also another way of preventing the risk of hypertension. Very quickly, before I forget, also consumption of foods high in omega-3. Fat fish, for example. And when I say fat fish, I don't say deep fried fish. Fish that is already high fat. For example, catfish is one of those that have a high omega-3. But also, if you're going to take things like margarine, and try to look for one with the Heart Foundation logo. Some also are fortified with omega-3. So look out for those as well. If you're going to purchase, the Heart Foundation logo is very visible on products that are qualified to have them. So look out for the Heart Foundation logo, and that can help with also management of triglycerides, or should I say lipids or fats in your system to prevent hypertension as well. So as you can see, it's a domino effect. When you are hypertensive, it can cascade a lot of other issues. And also hypertension is a result of a number of other issues. One thing happens, this thing happens, and which triggers this other thing to happen, and so on and so forth. And so, one way of doing that is creating a good balance, a good lifestyle. I hope you learned a thing or two. If you still have questions, please let's discuss in the comments section. I'll be more than happy to assist you. And with questions I can't assist you with, I'll refer you to the right people, but also consult, and together we can learn more. So, with that said, bye bye.